beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. Within this video I'll be sharing my first self-designed recipe that uses Lallemand's new gold standard hazy tropical yeast, Pomona. I really enjoy how this yeast performs and I feel that it works incredibly well with a hazy pale ale. Within this video I'll not only be sharing the recipe but also my methods from start to finish for brewing and fermenting this one. After this I will finish off with a look at and my tasting notes of the resulting beer. So let's get started. Let's kick off with a look at this recipe's vital statistics. As you can see, the recipe offers an approximate ABV of 5.4%, making this one a very good session beer which can be enjoyed throughout an evening. The BUGU shows the relationship between bitterness and alcohol at 0.76, making this one very much in the middle scale for the style. This recipe, like all of my shared recipes, has gone through various stages of development and tweaking to reach its current state, which gets my full approval, so please do brew with confidence. My thanks go out to Lallemand for making this possible by supplying me with Pomona yeast ahead of its launch. My recipe can be found in full within the video's description, which is underneath the video window when viewed on a desktop computer. You will also find a link there to the full recipe on Brewfather, which can be used free of charge with some restrictions. I strongly suggest that you fully convert the recipe before ordering in your ingredients so that you're actually brewing the recipe as intended. I also suggest that you brew this recipe as is the first time rather than tweaking it, as tweaks are already in place to bring this recipe into a very good shape. I have an easy guide to recipe conversion using Brewfather on my channel as shown on screen now. Within this video this recipe is being brewed using a Brewzilla 65 litre brewing system to the volume of 20 litres or 5.28 US LQD Gallons, but as part of the conversion process this can be shaped and scaled to suit your own brewing system and volume requirements. Shown on screen is the water profile that I recommend for using with this recipe. This hoppy profile is ideal for this beer. We want to accentuate the hop qualities. Using the right water profile is very important. After all, beer is mostly water and its balance is vital so that it suits the beer that you are brewing. Naturally, this water profile is just one way to go here. If you have a different profile that you really enjoy, then certainly go with that. Brewfather also has very good documentation on how to use the software to make the necessary water changes too. This makes the whole process very easy, so as such I suggest that all brewers, irrespective of experience, start treating their water as soon as possible for the very best of end results. You may well be surprised how easy it actually is. It is now time for the actual brew, which starts with the mashing phase. Here I have added the mash water, which is preheated to the first mash step temperature before the grain is then added and then stirred in. Here I am taking the easy route by using a stainless steel mixer attachment and a drill, which makes fast work of this. Naturally you can also do this by hand using a mash paddle. Either way it is vital to ensure that you have a very good mix and that every grain is wet and not clumped together. Here is the mash schedule for this one, which has a slightly higher mash in temperature to keep our final gravity in check. I suggest that you perform both the mash in and out steps for the best and easiest outcome brew-wise. Let's now start our mash and look at the fermentables that we are mashing with this one. Firstly we have Otter Malt at 68% of our grist. This is a premium pale ale malt and worth the extra cash for the better flavour it will provide, but it has to be said the result will be slight for most people. Alternatives are pale ale malt or golden promise. This malt provides our main fermentables and some nice background flavour that will allow building of further flavour from our hops and yeast, which are of course the main contributors of flavour and aroma for this recipe. Then at 22% we have Munich malt, which adds a little sweetness for balancing as well as some extra malty and bready flavours to the background of this recipe. Then we have caramel malt at 5%, which is mainly in place to add in some colour, but it will also serve to add a little body and head retention too. Then lastly at the remaining 5% we have wheat malt, which will add in some texture, further head retention, mouthfeel and some haze in combination with our yeast. After mash out I performed a slow manual sparge to wash the remaining sugars through the grain bed. It is vital to cover the whole top plate during this process, but avoid flooding it too for the very best of efficiency results. Soon after the sparge the Brewzilla reached the boil and I cleared the protein head using a paddle. In keeping with the modern boil time, this one is boiled for 30 minutes. As you can see on the right hand side of the screen, the first hop addition here is with 15 minutes remaining in the boil. So if you are in preference of a 60-minute boil, then it is of course of no consequence, and as such easily changed as long as you allow for this within your brewing system's details, within your brewing software, as naturally your water volumes will need to compensate for this. The hops used here within the brewing side are Citra, Galaxy, Mosaic, and within the dry hop, which we'll come to later, I'm using Citra, Mosaic and Motueka. Let's now look at the flavours and aromas that these bring to this brew. Within this chart you can see highlighted in orange Citra, which pushes grape citrus elements followed by tropical fruit, berry and floral elements. Mosaic shown in blue pushes berry the most, followed by citrus, tropical fruit, resin and pine and grassy elements. Motueka shown in green pushes great citrus strength followed by tropical fruit and grassy and floral elements. Galaxy shown in red pushes tropical fruit the strongest followed by lesser elements of stone fruit, berry and floral. This combination of hops offers the following fruit flavours and aromas in the forefront: peach, apricot, passion fruit, lemon, lime, orange, pineapple, mango, along with other tropical fruit in the background. Towards the end of the boil I set up my counterflow chiller and recirculated some boiling hot water through it to sanitize it for a couple of minutes. This chiller will be used for the final cooling and transfer to my fermenter, but first we have the hop stand. So I added my Scylla chiller from Jaded Brewing and then used it to cool the wort down to hop stand temperatures as shown on screen. To speed this process up, I added some extra stirring in by hand. This way I can cool the whole wort down to the hop stand temperature in less than 1 minute, which is something that the counterflow chiller just isn't close to competing with, as it cools sections of wort rather than the whole wort. I then removed the Scylla chiller and added the hop stand hops and then gave them a very good stir in with a total rest time of 15 minutes. This stirring is simply done to amalgamate the hop oils within the wort as quickly as possible rather than being a whirlpool, as this Brazilla brewing system has a false bottom negating the need for a whirlpool as such. Next came the pitching of the Pomona yeast during my transfer to the fermenter, which in this case is Grainfather's conical fermenter. The sweet spot fermentation temperature for Pomona is 20 degrees Celsius, which is the equivalent of 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and you can expect the fermentation to be finished within 5 days in total. I usually find 3 to 4 days is pretty normal for this yeast so far in my brews with it. Because we want to enjoy this yeast's flavour and aroma, and because the fermentation is short, there really is little need for pressure fermentation here. The very next step is concerning the dry hop additions, which are now shown on screen. Add your dry hops when you are between 5 to 10 gravity points away from your predicted final gravity. I have tried all methods of dry hopping, but frankly nothing so far has had as good results, and there is no need to buy a book either. The very most important thing here is to keep things clean and sanitary, so here is a guide to doing that in a way that has never failed me so far in hundreds of brews. In this example I'm going to use a hop sock, but the procedure is similar with other container types. This starts with boiling the bag. I strongly recommend doing this no matter if the bag has been previously used and cleaned, or if it's a brand new one straight out of the packaging. I then add this bag into a clean container and add sanitizer as a further safeguard. This will be the same container that I used to load the hops into. After this point I then wash and sanitize my hands, and this is repeated if I need to touch the bag after touching anything that is not clean and sanitary. These are very important steps to avoid contamination, which is all too common when it comes to homebrewers making IPAs because of this step. I then carefully add the dry hops with the bag lining the container, being sure that nothing touches the bag except for the hops. Once you have loaded all of your hops into the bag, then be sure to tie a nice strong knot to keep all of the hops contained. This loosely fitting hop bag, so there is room to expand, can now be added into your fermenter. In terms of contact time, 3 days is usually going to be plenty, but 5 days is fine too. I would avoid times more than a week to avoid grassy off flavours though. Let's now take a look at the finished beer, starting with the pour, and after this I will give you my tasting notes. As you can see, the pour is a light golden colour, but once in the glass the end beer is a hazy orange colour, just as you would expect for this style, which you cannot see during this pour unfortunately, as the light box this beer is in front of has lost its light. So here is the same beer in front of a box that actually has a light that works. This beer is in its natural state and no attempts have been made to clear it, which is in keeping with this hazy American Pale Ale beer style. This beer has been under 12 psi of pressure, which is 0.83 bars, and I am using this pressure for serving too. The example you see here is at around the 4-week part from kegging, and this is conditioned flavour-wise very nicely in this time. Though like quite a few hoppy beers, it was also very good, actually very new and fresh. Let's now go through my tasting notes, starting with aroma. The aroma found here is very citrus, along with peach, pineapple and a mix of other tropical fruit in the background. On entry, this beer is strongly citrus and tropical, which expands in flavour in the middle with apricot, lemon, lime, orange, pineapple, all being the main flavours that I detect. The finish is soft and easy, and it is fair to say that the beer is somewhat on the juicy side. And here are some of my recipe notes. The Pomona yeast used provides a juicy flavour profile that pushes peach, citrus and tropical fruit. The aim of my recipe was to pair hops that also push these qualities, along with complementing flavours to produce an easy drinking and yet interestingly complex array of different tropical fruit flavours and aromas. I am very happy that this recipe achieves this, hence why it is now ready for sharing. My final impression here is that this is a hazy and tropical juicy pale ale that reaches new heights thanks to Pomona yeast and the hop schedule combination of this recipe. So there you have it. Do let myself and the community know what you think of this video, and then later on, once you have brewed this recipe, your own tasting notes. And of course, keep your questions coming. I'm always more than happy to help. I do hope that you found this video useful, informative and interesting. If so, why not consider liking and subscribing? For further support, you can join the channel's Facebook group, and if you would like to support the channel, then check out the channel's merchandise store, as all profits go back into the channel. Until next time, happy brewing!